federal government will hold an online safety roundtable this morning aimed at addressing rising sexual violence rates. Joining us live now is the CEO of Full Stop Australia, Hayley Foster. Hayley, good morning to you. So what changes will you be arguing for?
Oh, good morning. Yes, we're really excited about this roundtable this morning, where dating app companies and women's safety ministers right across the country will come together, along with domestic and sexual violence experts, to try to create a plan to really tackle what is a very, very big problem with sexual and domestic violence on dating apps, with 3/4 of users reporting some form of experience of sexual violence. So today, the key changes we're asking for and calling for are that the dating app users are required to submit themselves to ID checks in order to use the app. And the reason that that's important is because if we know who is on the apps, then we're able to hold people to account, and they can't just delete their account when they've been abusive and then start a new one in search of their next prey. The other key change is that we are calling, we think it's high time for a domestic violence offender register. We already have a sexual violence offender register in this country, but we need to recognise that domestic and family violence is a pattern crime, and there are very serious high-risk repeat offenders out there with there's no way of checking to make sure that, to screen people like that out of spaces like this.
Okay, so that's essentially background checks, correct?
Yeah, essentially. And so we know that you can already run a check, working with children's check, for example, if somebody may have used sexual violence, been convicted of that in the past. We know that it's very simple to do ID checks. Many companies do that online very, very quickly, instantaneously. Companies like GoGet or Uber Eats and those sorts of companies, there is a lot of technology to make it really easy to do a 100-point check.
Right. So who would do that? So that would be just for a person who wanted to get on the site or wanted to get on the app? That's right. And it doesn't mean that you have to put your personality out there to the public. It just means the dating app provider know who is on the app. And that way, if something happens, if there are reports of abuse or violence, they can check into that. And they can also then cooperate with law enforcement agencies. We have a massive problem at the moment because it's almost like a free-for-all. It's almost like a smorgasbord for people who are going out and using predatory behaviour to access their next victims, because there's no recourse. They can just go onto the app, use it to prey upon people, particularly people who might be vulnerable. And then if there are any issues, they can just block that person and they can delete their app as well and delete their profile and start a new one. So we need to stop that from happening. Yeah, so how would you stop, say, ID checks or background checks from being abused?
Yeah, look, I think we're just talking about being able to use the app to identify yourself. We're not talking about having it out there for everyone to see. There are very real reasons and very reasonable reasons why, when people are dating on these apps and searching on these apps, that they don't want to be, able to be searchable and everybody can see them. But we're just talking about having some accountability so that the app providers can create a safe space for people using their services.
Which apps and websites are we talking about?
Well, look, we're talking about all of the major dating apps, and we're really pleased to see the vast majority of these are going to be in attendance today. We know, and we have worked with a number of dating apps, the really common ones like Bumble, and we've been looking at how they can improve their design, how they can have educational functions on them. And that's really important, but we need to be really careful not to put all the onus on the person that might be targeted by the abuse to protect themselves. We have to, as a community and as companies with social responsibility, we need to take some responsibility to make sure that these places are safe. And the fact that 3/4 of users are reporting experiencing sexual violence after using one of these apps means that, we really have a responsibility to take some tangible action that's about government regulation potentially, and also around the dating apps making commitments themselves. But, of course, we still want people to, exercise safety when they're engaging, but we can't leave all the onus on the victim. If you could do everything right on a dating app and still fall prey.
So just back on your plan. So if somebody has been convicted of domestic violence in the past, How would they be stopped from getting on board the app?
Yeah, look, some, like the New South Wales Premier yesterday suggested that there's just a screening process from the get-go. And so anybody who's been convicted of a serious or repeat offending in this regard be screened out of the app altogether. Another kind of perhaps middle way is to make sure that we at least know who's on the app. And if there are problems, if somebody reports serious violence and abuse from somebody who's on those apps, at least the app provider can then initiate their own sanctions. They can also cooperate with law enforcement agencies, because that's been a problem, is that, law enforcement agencies are trying to do their work in this regard, but, dating app companies are often sort of throwing their hands up in the air and saying, oh, they deleted their account, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. So, but how would someone be screened out?
Yeah, so at the moment, it's just about, the only thing that we'd have in place now is that dating apps themselves could sanction someone or say that they're not able to use the account anymore. But at the moment, it's really about cooperating with law enforcement agencies, and they can make that call. We want to make that simpler for companies, just like service agencies that work with vulnerable people in our community, to run a simple check. We do criminal checks when we go for our jobs and those sorts of things. When we sign up to be an Uber driver or a taxi driver and those sorts of things, we have to have checks in place. And we're talking about having the same sort of checks that could be run either proactively or in response to complaints from users that can be, fairly substantiated.
Hayley Foster, good luck today. We'll talk to you again soon.